So thanks for coming. And so we had already asked who has heard of Ansible before. So Ansible is a configuration management tool. Anyone used any other configuration management tools besides Ansible before? Eric? Puppet, yeah, it's similar. We looked at both Puppet and Chef and Ansible when we were starting out with this maybe 3 years ago, and we just liked the way that Ansible was structured and how easy it was to get up and running and stuff like that. So
it was free.
Yeah, and they're all free. Yeah, but yeah. So Jacob evaluated those, and I helped him with that, and we settled on Ansible, and it's been a road from there to now, and we have now all of QA, dev and QA is on Ansible, and production is about to be when we do the data center, the hardware upgrade. Sorry. Anyway, so what is Ansible? It's a tool where you define tasks that are going to get executed on a server or a group of servers. So you define roles that each server will have. A server can have multiple roles, and in that role you have a task definition that says run all these steps. Oh, I forgot to start my little thing here that I'm going to erase. We'll talk about that later. There we go.
It's going.
It's going. And so, where was I? So it has a list of tasks that it goes through for each role, and will step through and lost my train of thought. Yeah, it'll do whatever's in that task list. Anyway, so that can have templates that are in there and tar files, and it'll deploy all those things to the new server, and you don't have to worry about it. Once you've scripted it, it's always going to step through and check things, and it won't touch things that it's already done in the past, and it will let you know what things it's changed when it's done running. So I already mentioned that servers are in roles, and the roles can be used to basically it's a logical thing. Like there's a front-end server which has PHP on it, and it is in this data center running this OS, and all those components will have their own set of tasks and their own set of default configurations, but those can be overwritten at a server level or a group level. In the case of data centers, you have a group that says, if you're in this data center, you expect to have this stuff required, and that will help bucket your things and know which tasks should have what variables applied to it. So a few things that Ansible is good at. It can install and remove packages, make sure there's a certain version, make sure the latest version, make sure they're just there in general, but don't worry about version. It can generate a configuration, any file on the system, anything you need, a script, a configuration, a property file. You can have a template of that with variables and Jinja-do syntax, which is a simple programming language that has if statements and loops, and will let you specify certain things to include or not include depending on that server's variables and the situation that it's in. And it'll do all the deploying of templates and files and other things like that. It can create your users and your groups so that you have a consistent set of users across this thing. It can set up LDAP, so LDAP works on every server. And it can have certain tasks, if they run with a certain exit code, can trigger other tasks, and that lets you get very complicated systems working with a repeatable set of steps. So, yeah, triggers and conditional tasks and variables. Loops, I mentioned. So you can have an array of things like Apache instances, say that this server needs these 3 Apache instances, and you put that in a variable, and then it will loop over that array and deploy 3 Apaches to that server. You don't have to think about it, it just does it. Basically anything you can do on the command line, you can write into a task. Anything that can be done in a non-interactive shell will work. Anyway, so why do we use Ansible? Because it really cuts down on the amount of work required to do all sorts of things. So when we move to the new hardware, it is going to cut down the amount of people required and time required by tenfold at least. You can when we had to add capacity for Stiefel over 6 months ago, wherever it was, we were able to in an afternoon to bring up 4 or 5 new servers just out of thin air. We got VMs from infrastructure and ran the Ansible script, and we had 5 new servers that just worked. And recovery from failure, cross your fingers, we haven't had to use that, but it would work the same way as adding new servers. Since it's all in SVN and SVN is backed up, we can take that configuration and deploy new servers out of nothing. So it also lets us have, because it's in SVN, an inventory of what's installed. You can just look at the task. You know what's there. You know what's specified in the version numbers, and you know everything about a server because we start with a bare bones server and everything is done through Ansible. So it also lets you compare between dev and QA. Like when we set up cache, we had it in QA first, and then we had to bring it up in production because we actually had the boxes were old Solaris boxes that just stopped working. So we just copied our QA cache task role and copied that into production Ansible and ran it, and we had cache in production, easily. So in the past, when we had to make a new server, we would just take what's the closest thing to that, copy that, clone that VM, and that's an easy way to do things, but it's also a trap that you don't really know what you're getting. You don't know 100% what's on the server. You don't know the versions, and it's easy to miss configuration and things like that when you just copy something and hope it works. So with Ansible, you just have an inventory of everything that you expect to be there. And for future updates, you have an audit trail. Because it's an SVN, you can look back in Fisheye and Crucible, just like we use for source control. You can code review Ansible changes. If you weren't using something with a configuration management tool, there's no accountability on what changes were made to files on a server. And because if you set it up to run on a regular basis to update things or whatever, you can ensure that everything is always in sync with what's in SVN. So collaboration, because it's source controlled, and just like any software project, you can have multiple developers working on it, be them infrastructure or technology or software developers. You can all contribute to what is going to be on that server and check each other's work and things like that. So it makes it a lot easier than if you're doing a conventional way, your only option is to sit next to each other and look at the same terminal. So it's easy. I mentioned already code review. You can use existing code review processes to review Ansible changes, and knowledge transfer is easier because it's all in there. You can write a how-to on how to make Ansible changes in general, but beyond that, everything is in there. It's not just the guy who installed it knows how it's there, because the installation step by step is in the task. So in terms of consistency, you can update all servers at once exactly the same every time. You're not going to have to worry about missing a property file on one server or something like that. And sharing assets. So each roles can reference files from other roles and things like that. So you don't have to have copy pastes of everything around and changing it in one place. You can affect other places. So that way you minimize the amount of duplicated code in Ansible, so that you have less of a chance of missing something when you make changes. And running a configuration management tool, if you stick to the thing, always do it through Ansible, then you don't have to worry about things on the server being overwritten and missed and stuff like that. So if it's always in Ansible, then you always have a record and it always is reproducible. Ansible has the ability to use encrypted variable files, and we use that for our database passwords and our private SSH keys and things like that. So we can store those in an encrypted file that, therefore, you can't just, not anyone can read it. You actually have to use the Ansible tool to view it in a viewer. And so that way it's secure to be actually in source control, and it's in one place, so we can just change it whenever we need it. You know, if we decide we need to rotate our passwords or something like that, we can just update it in one place and it's done. So some ways we use Ansible is we have two projects for we have one that does dev and QA and one that does production, and that's mainly a responsibilities division kind of thing, so that, you know, we can have the Active Directory groups on permissions so that only senior people can push changes to production and things like that. And that way, you know, we can test things in QA. Anyone can commit to the QA project, and we can just then compare that with production and move changes selectively. The other thing we use is servers are in groups, and each group will define like a logical unit, like the Savvis data center or the DR data center or the new hardware is its own group, so that we can easily share configuration and know what it, you know, have differences between the servers. So the roles have tasks, and that I've mentioned before, and that is how we organize exactly what's happening on the server. And the templates I already mentioned. I guess this slide is kind of a repeat. That the templates have the Jinja 2, which I'll go into a little more of that. It's just their Ansible's scripting language that they adopted for their configuration file system. So it has, you know, basic loops and if statements, and you can set default settings for a template and things like that. So you can easily get a config file like our Apache config is a complicated file, especially in QA, where it has a macro that goes through each client to have it have the same thing for each client, but then every client has a copy for a branch and all the things. So it loops through it and creates a giant Apache configuration from one little macro section. So otherwise, before, we used to have a giant file with copied and pasted stuff, and if you change something in one place, you had to change it in 100 places, and it was terrible. So it makes things like night and day. It's so much easier to just complicated configurations a lot easier. In middleware, we're starting to do the property files in Ansible. So we have a shared property file that's just a generic one with everything in it, and then if statements and variables that split out what is actually enabled for that server. So then we can deploy that property file to whichever groups need it, and whichever client it's actually running in that task loop will get just their settings. And it's a Confluence page that I just put in for reference later, that links all that Jacob has written up on how we use Ansible and how we create servers in Ansible and things like that. So I just wanted to say thank you to the people that have contributed most to this. Jacob got everything started. He's on vacation right now. He was going to do this presentation with me, but he helped me get this going, and he's done a lot of work on Ansible over the past 3 years that we've been using it. Lerone, he's sick today, but he was my guinea pig. Getting middleware onto Ansible, bouncing things off the wall. Can I do this way? And then I eventually turned it over to him, and he's taken it and is doing all the QA stuff, the new QA stuff. Val, and you're doing the same thing with Maxit, and that's great. I think you did it already with Broadridge and right? And,
no, we only dev QA right
dev
now.
QA and Broadridge. Or no?
No Broadridge.
Okay.
Who did you
But we're going to do a new product.
Eric told me Broadridge.
Who did you use it for?
Only Dev QA.
But all clients?
Yeah.
Okay.
For
So
QA.
that's huge.
Yeah. And infrastructure, we couldn't do any of this without VMs and your support, and you know, we want to bring you in as much as possible to this because, you know, it's your servers too, you know. I don't know how long ago that thing finished. Did anyone paying attention? No. Oh, the one's there. Hi.
Right, Laurel?
It was just moving a second ago.
It was moving a second ago.
Now it says fatal.
That one's supposed to fail. Oh, see, it finished a while ago. My screen just wasn't scrolled down enough. So I anyway, that I don't know how long ago that finished, but that was I recorded it earlier. How deploying from scratch an entire investor front end, and it takes 12 minutes. You know, if I were to sit there and do that from scratch on, you know, by hand, I'd be there for an hour at least. You know, so there's just no way we would do 100 servers that we're getting in the hardware move. You know, a minimum of an hour at a time. You know, it's 100 hours. Otherwise, 12 minutes. What is that? You know, just I don't know. I can't do math in my head.
What are all the parts that we would have? We'd have front end. We'd have middleware. We'd have all the different components.
So,
of this
but I mean, even besides just that, I mean, just doing a front end server, you have to install all the software, compile PHP, you know, get the right PHP packages, write PHP modules. All these steps are in the Ansible script, and you can, you know, you just click one thing at the front. You do Ansible Playbook, run the Ansible Playbook, the Investor 5 script, and you can optionally tell it what servers or what section of the script to run. And it just goes, and you can walk away, and you have a server. You know.
So we're getting how many VMs, Eric? About 105, right? Yeah. So just the front end portion of that alone across 105 servers at 12 minutes a clip, right? It's kind of what's making it possible to bring the data in, because the way we used to do this was custom compile the Apache binaries one at a time, and we've had, you know, when you split that into two different guys doing it, you know, they don't actually get done the same way, and we've had servers that are out of sync. So this is a huge win.
So I heard less work and
less work faster, yeah.
and better consistency of setting up environments. But will this also help us not forget a configuration file on production night?
Exactly, yeah. So
And you mentioned he has cache, so it's also going to make sure that thing's set up?
Well, we haven't ever had a problem with the HCAS except when a server broke. So, but besides that, yeah.
So
you can't miss a server because it's all in the script, you know, and you're not going to forget to do the property file because it's in the script. You know, everything.
Repeatable.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So what happens in like the case last night with the HT access file?
Yeah, that's actually part of code, so that wouldn't be covered in this.
No, our OpenSSL, right? If the last night's options were, you know, just fail, right?
Yeah.
Or upgrade libcurl.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Or push everybody over to another, another server. But
aside
if libcurl,
the fact that the new servers will not have that problem aside, you know, the problem last night we could have just solved by, you know, going in the Ansible script, saying update, you know, libSSL, and run it, and we would have had new SSL, or optionally new PHP if we had to. You know, you could do all these things in 10 minutes and call it a day.
But across two data centers, like we could have just done it across all servers, across all data centers.
Yeah. We wouldn't have been scrambling and saying, you know, can we find a version of OpenSSL and compile it and update it right now? You know, it wouldn't even be a question. We would just done it. You know.
Does it run when you run the playbook? You have 100 servers. Does it run like all synchronously, or you can do like?
It runs each task one at a time, but it runs the servers in parallel inside that task.
Okay.
So when we're building the newer servers for the Maxit, we also using Ansible?
Only Maxit front end for now. So only Maxit front end. There's
so
no
middleware and all will be manually installed.
Middleware, yeah, it's still manual.
This is kind of the work that Laurent's doing. He's bringing middleware up, right? And then, you know, it all translates to max it as well. You know, they still have to make their own playbooks, but the concept is we started with the front end and now, you know, middleware's coming to speed. So as part of, by the time we're done with the data center move on Wealth, you know, the entire stack is managed through Ansible.
They're only doing this for the wealth management part, right?
Right, but so
There's no reason that middleware on Maxit couldn't be done in Ansible. That just, I guess that was a product decision to not. I don't know.
well, no, I
But-
think that what's happening sort of the tail end of this, so the next week and a half, you know, Laurent I think he's on the call.
He said something before, yeah.
He's got a workshop that he's going to hold in the next week and a half. That's for, you know, all middleware developers. I know we've got some infrastructure interest. So really, it's anybody who wants to join to really kind of go into, you know, the details of how do you get yourself started, right? So because we have just some middleware developers in Wealth that haven't touched it yet, and so we're trying to do our own knowledge transfer and get everybody involved. But we're opening up to everybody to learn.
But also Max, it has multiple, like on middleware side, there's like DMI, there's CDRS, there's multiple
We've got multiple
roles.
middlewares as well.
I mean,
Yeah.
the roles, we need to define multiple jobs. You have like Jetty middleware.
Yeah,
you
you'll have to make your own
Yeah.
playbooks based on your
Yeah.
application. But
Yeah, basically, it's not done for you, but you could easily make a role for each of your components.
Now, do you have Playbook templates?
no playbook time.
Playbook templates, yeah.
Come to the workshop.
We see to me about that.
The workshop.
Now, the templates are so the custom templates. Where do you get them from? You create them or you
So
have
we
them
write,
already there?
I think I
You have some examples.
I do have some examples I stuck at the end in case we had questions, so let me just grab those. Those are group config variable templates. Okay, so this is just a shell script. We took a shell script and you can stick, you know, variables in here, and just, you know, this only shows up on an ADP server because we have an item.adp defined. So, like, that's like in these. This is a task definition. So it says with items Apache instances. So it will pull in the configuration for an Apache instance. Like, it's not there, but it looks something like this. It's just a bunch of different keys. And it will, you can get each one of those keys all the way into the file. So the ADP flag is one of the keys in that task group. So you basically, you take any file that you wanted to use as a template, and you can just stick these variables and if statements and loops into it, and control what the end file looks like. So the end result of that is just a normal bash script that has strings in it, you know, that were coming from variables. So you have one file and you can populate it in 100 different ways, you know, depending on with different ports and different server names and things like that.
Like the HTTP conf, right? The Apache config file, right? Take that base template it comes with. We have what we've modified over time by hand, but we take that, create variables in it for doc routes and stuff like that. That becomes our template, pop it in here, make your variable file, and then that becomes a task. So now we can consistently create Apache config files deployed across all servers. And then if we have to make a change to it, you know, we can make a change to the template and instantly push it out across all servers at the same time.
But you can also add tags like you see over there Apache, so you can run with that tag and it will only do that config.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
You
So
don't have to like.
the whole script takes 12 minutes or whatever to install the first time. Any subsequent runs are more like 3. But if I just wanted to update an Apache config, I have tag Apache on everything related to that, and I can run that, and the whole thing will be done in 30 seconds. You know, just time savers to not run things that you know you don't need to check right now.
I have one. Also, was the groups. You have the groups.
Yeah.
When you separate the groups like Savis and SunGuard, was that intended in order for us? Let's say we want to update only DR first and then test, and then update
Yeah,
production.
you can do -L to limit by either server name or by group, and so you can update a specific group if you want to. But actually, the reason we have like Savis as a group is just so we can have specific configuration of that data center.
Oh, okay.
Because you can have in the variables you can override things at a lot of different levels, at the group level, at the server level, at the task level. So we use that group level to set variables that are consistent across that data center. You had a question?
Yeah, so is this only going to help at server setup time, or
No, I mean, we use this constantly. Anytime we point,
so like if you have to do a code deployment, can this be helpful?
I wouldn't use it for code deployments.
Like for example, you mentioned the property files, right? We change property files for
Yes.
deployment all the time.
It's
So
very,
would you
very
use
useful for
them?
that.
Would you? So we use Smarty for code deployment right now.
Yeah.
So can we use?
Does
Ansible?
Smarty do property files?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Middleware. Sorry, wealth management wasn't used. It doesn't use Smarty in Dev and QA. So we have the Ansible does property files. But if you could either not, you could either remove that from Smarty and manage it in Ansible, or you could just continue using Smarty. But either way, you know, the old way was just copying files around, and that was messy, and things got
So
missed.
I think the advantage of using this goes back to especially with property files, right? How many times have we done a release and then it's not working? Oh, forgot to update the property on server X, right? You're hunting around to find where the problem is. You get the inventory out of this, so you know, plus the consistency. So if this can deploy fan across all the servers. So missing one server doesn't really happen, and at any moment you can get the inventory of what's out there. So you're not hunting around the boxes.
The inventory, if it is really looking up for the inventory, it has to be updated with the right location of the inventory.
But you would have updated the master, the template, right, that has the properties, checked it into source
yeah,
code.
but the
and then deployed
Ansible
it.
script will not have access to the actual file. Let's say you want to deploy a property file. The property file is sitting in CVS or somewhere, I guess.
Well,
right?
that's the thing. If you were going to use Ansible management, you put the property file in Ansible.
Right.
You don't
Oh,
put
okay.
it in source control.
Your
Well,
property
it's in
file
source
is a
control
template.
just with Ansible, not with the code.
Right.
Okay.
Because on Maxit we have the Maxit build,
Mhm.
and then it's on the build time, which is checks all the property files for each client, and it's part of the code build, and then Smarty will deploy it across all. So
Yeah.
I mean, for us, it's
So that's a good way. You
Yeah.
don't have to use Ansible.
Yeah, we don't
But
for that
I was
one,
saying
no.
on Wealth, we didn't use anything, so this
Sure.
was the way we decided to do
But
it.
Ansible is an actual proper product. Smarty is not
Yes.
really a product per
I
se.
know,
It's
yeah.
like something you put together.
it's still
But it-
two different things: code
Yeah.
deployment and then
Yeah, but
setup.
I mean, we use SVN tools still to do our code deployments,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't use Ansible to do code deployments. It's not meant for that. It's meant for configuration and installation.
Servers and
Yes.
But
Mm-hmm.
if you have like client-specific configuration, which is not common for all the
Mhm.
clients. So if you're installing on say one server and say another client sits on a different server, is it possible for you to configure that in this?
Yeah.
Do this and not
Yep.
here.
Yep.
Yes. So we have like each client has a different Apache core. It's not going to in the new data center, in the new hardware, but it used to. So you could have, this client, this is your port to run on. Client B, different port to run on. Yeah. You put that in your variables like. I don't have a good example, but pretend, so different URLs on each client, and it would sub in whatever.
I mean,
thing
Dev
is
QA
on
is
there.
like that today, right? Every
Yeah.
time we have a project, we spin up a code branch and a separate full stack middleware instance, from Apache instance, and we use Ansible to manage all that. So we're all day long, we're making new branches, new environments up and down. So that's really, we've been using that probably the last 3 years. This is now, we're moving this to production, so you can absolutely have that fine-grained control per client.
So how, like, what does an environment mean? I mean, how do you define an environment? Let's say, for example, I'm working on, say, fixed income. I'm doing something in UAT. Production is not ready. I have a folder. I'm writing a lot of scripts. I'm doing several things in that folder on the box. But I want to really carry over that to a production box.
Yeah, so that you'd be doing that all in the Dev QA Ansible and deploying that to your test server and stuff like that. And once you're satisfied with it and you're ready and it's going to production, then you'd copy it to the production Ansible. Everything you can just carry right over, and
Okay,
then
so
you
if
set
I
up your
already
own.
started in the UAT or QA environment and Ansible is not aware of it right now, can I migrate everything into Ansible and then port it to production? Or does it have to start in Ansible and then do it in QA and then do it in
Well,
production?
that's just how you choose to. It's not like a.
It's not Ansible, it's not Ansible constraint.
That's
Yeah.
not Ansible. Yeah, that's a U
Okay.
constraint, not an Ansible
Yeah.
constraint.
If you defined a production playbook, you wanted to start there, right? So we keep our Dev QA playbooks over here and production over here, right?
Right.
If you started with your production one and applied it, you could then take your production one, say, and start working your way